Welcome to the Money Mindset and Habits podcast.
Great to be here.
Today, we're diving into something really powerful. It's how those small, consistent actions you take with your money, they can fundamentally reshape your entire financial life.
Yeah, absolutely. Forget the big, flashy, get-rich-quick stuff.
Right.
We're exploring this idea that lasting wealth isn't really about massive overnight success, but it's much more about the person you actually become through your everyday money habits.
That's such a key distinction. We get so focused on the big numbers, the end goal.
But the real magic, I think, happens when we focus on cultivating what we might call a wealthy identity.
A wealthy identity. Explain that a bit more.
It's, a sense of self that just naturally makes choices that align with financial well-being. And these small wins, the ones that seem almost insignificant, they're the actual building blocks of that identity.
Exactly. So our mission today is really to unpack this. How those tiny financial victories are genuinely transformational.
Yeah, they lay the groundwork.
They do. They lay the groundwork for a wealthy self-image. And here's a really interesting part, that self-image then sort of propels you to create even more wealth.
It's a fantastic cycle, a positive feedback loop.
It really is. And to see this in action, let's talk about Maya. Her story, I think, perfectly illustrates this kind of shift.
It does. For years, Maya held on to some very common beliefs, things many of us can probably relate to when it comes to money.
Oh, absolutely. Like what?
Well, things like, I'm just not good with money. You hear that a lot.
So common. Or budgeting just isn't for me. It's not my thing.
Exactly. Or even identifying as always a spender, almost like it was this fixed personality trait she couldn't change.
And her daily habits completely backed that up, didn't they?
Totally. She'd avoid looking at her bank balance. Understandable, maybe, but it never gave her that feeling of control.
No, it breeds anxiety.
Right. And emotional spending was often her default, a quick fix, but it usually led to more financial stress down the line.
And goal setting.
Well, tellingly, she didn't really set financial goals because deep down, she just didn't believe she could actually achieve them.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it?
Precisely. That feeling of being stuck. Like, why bother trying if you're convinced it won't work?
But then something changed for Maya. And it wasn't like a lottery win or anything dramatic.
No, not at all. It was surprisingly simple, actually. She stumbled across a quote, I think it was on Instagram.
Yeah.
The quote was, "You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems."
You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Okay, let's unpack that. What was it about that idea that clicked?
Well, for Maya, what really struck her was the focus on the process, not just the outcome.
Right, the day-to-day actions.
Exactly. She'd been so fixated on these big, maybe overwhelming financial goals that felt impossible. This quote shifted her focus to the small, manageable actions, the systems she could actually implement consistently.
Made it feel less daunting, I imagine.
Much less daunting. It broke it down.
So she started experimenting with these systems, these tiny shifts. What did that look like, practically speaking, in those early days?
In her first month, the changes were almost laughably small, some might say, but that was the point.
Okay, give us examples.
She opened a completely new savings account, a fresh start, and deposited just $10.
$10.
$10. The amount wasn't the point. It was the act of saving, the intention. She also started using a grocery list every single time she went shopping.
Such a basic thing, but powerful.
It really is. It brings intentionality, helps curb those impulse buys we all know too well.
Guilty as charged sometimes. What else?
To cut down temptation, she unsubscribed from just 2 marketing email lists. Those retailers that just know.
They know exactly when you're vulnerable.
Right. And then she carefully approached budgeting. She downloaded an app, but, and this is key for her sustainability, she only committed to tracking her spending for 1 week.
Just 1 week, okay.
Felt much less overwhelming than trying to change everything overnight.
I love that. Baby steps, removing the friction, making it feel less like this huge chore. And you mentioned she even reframed how she thought about budgeting.
Yes, this is so important. Instead of the word budgeting, which for her carried all this negative rate restriction, deprivation.
Yeah, it sounds like a diet for your money.
Kind of. She consciously started calling it her money check-in.
Money check-in, I like that.
It was subtle, but incredibly powerful. Just changing the language reduced her internal resistance. It made it feel less punitive, more like a neutral assessment.
Okay, so none of these actions individually sound earth-shattering. $10 here, grocery list there. What was the real impact when she put them together?
What's really fascinating in the core of this is that these tiny steps together gave Maya something crucial. Evidence.
Evidence.
Yeah, proof. Proof that she could exert some control over her money, even in these small ways. Proof she could set an intention and follow through.
Ah.
And gathering that evidence started to build something vital. Self-trust. It began chipping away at that old negative self-image about her money skills.
So it wasn't about the balance suddenly ballooning, but about nurturing that internal belief, that feeling of, hey, maybe I can do this.
Precisely. And that's really the heart of what we want to explore with you today. This isn't just, another list of financial tips.
Right.
It's about understanding that deep shift in how you see yourself, which happens through these consistent, intentional actions, no matter how small they seem at first.
So you're saying identity comes before strategy in a way.
In building lasting wealth, yes. Your identity as someone who is good with money, who manages it well, truly comes before picking the perfect investment or the most complex budget spreadsheet.
And this idea, identity shaping habits,
Yeah.
it rings a bell. It connects to broader ideas in behavioral science, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You're probably thinking of James Clear's work, Atomic Habits, and the concept of identity-based habits.
That's it.
The core idea is that when you start seeing yourself as a particular kind of person, say a saver, an investor, someone who manages money well, the habits aligning with that identity become easier to sustain. They feel like a natural part of who you are.
It's becoming a saver rather than just trying to save money.
Exactly. It's less about forcing yourself into actions that feel foreign
Yeah.
and more about evolving your self-perception so those positive behaviors just feel authentic.
That makes so much sense. And you touched on this earlier, why traditional, really strict budgeting often fails people.
Yes. Often, those big, all-encompassing budgeting systems feel incredibly restrictive right from the get-go.
Overwhelming.
Totally. And when you try to change too much too fast, it's easy to feel deprived, burnt out, and just give up. Starting small, like Maya did, builds consistency. That's the magic ingredient. You build momentum and that sense of capability gradually, it's much more likely to stick.
And the language we use, how we talk to ourselves about money, that seems crucial too. Moving away from, I can't afford that.
Absolutely critical. That shift from a mindset of limitation, of lack, to one of empowerment, saying, I can't buy that, feels like a punishment, right? Reinforces scarcity.
Yeah, it does.
But reframing it as, say, I'm choosing to put these resources towards building my future wealth instead, puts you back in control.
Connects the choice to a bigger goal.
Yes. It links your present choice to something positive and motivating. You're focusing on what you're gaining security, freedom, not just what you're temporarily giving up.
I love that reframing. Now, you also mentioned something called an evidence journal. That sounds intriguing. How would someone actually use that?
The evidence journal is really simple conceptually. It's just a place, could be a notebook, a note on your phone, whatever works for you, where you consciously jot down your small financial wins.
Like what kind of wins?
Oh, anything. Skipped my usual 3 pounds coffee today, made one at home, or paid 1 pound more than the minimum on my credit card, or transferred that 5 pounds to my emergency fund automatically.
So really small things count.
Absolutely. The act of recording these wins, no matter how tiny they seem, reinforces that emerging wealthy identity. You're literally collecting proof for yourself.
Building a case file for your new self.
Exactly. A tangible record of your progress, showing yourself you're capable.
That's great. Have we heard from listeners who've actually tried this kind of approach? Put these small wins into practice.
We have. We've gotten some really inspiring little snippets that bring this principle to life. Take Jordan, for instance.
Okay.
Jordan felt really bogged down by credit card debt. His first small win, he focused on paying off just one single $200 credit card balance.
Not the whole lot, just one small one.
Right. It wasn't about making the entire debt vanish overnight. It was about creating that first success, proving to himself that debt wasn't this permanent, insurmountable thing.
That's incredibly motivating, just making that first crack. Any others?
Yeah, we also heard from Lena. She set a goal to save her very first $100 for an emergency fund.
Okay, $100.
For some, that might seem small, but for Lena, hitting that $100 mark gave her this huge sense of empowerment, a feeling of security she hadn't really felt before. Concrete proof she could save, build a safety net.
Wow. It really shows the psychological impact.
It does. And then there's Arun. He decided to tackle his regular bills. He actually took the initiative, called his phone company, and negotiated his bill down by $15 a month.
Nice.
And now he genuinely identifies as like the kind of person who looks for and gets better deals. It's not just the $15 saving, it's the shift in how he sees himself, proactive, resourceful.
These stories are brilliant because they show Anyone can start this wherever they are financially.
Mm.
So for you listening, what's the key message here?
The core message is really this. Building wealth doesn't require some massive, painful overhaul fueled by pure willpower. It starts with you consciously gathering proof of your own ability to manage money well, one small, intentional step at a time.
Can we give a few more really concrete examples? Things someone could literally do today?
Sure, it could be as simple as choosing to pack a lunch instead of buying one, just for today,
Okay.
or setting a timer for 5 minutes tonight
Right.
and just quickly tracking where your money went today. No judgment, just awareness.
Simple awareness.
Or setting up that tiny automatic transfer, maybe just 5, 10 pounds, whatever, feels almost negligible from your current account to a savings account. Weekly, maybe.
These actions, they seem small, but you're saying they're like affirmations.
Exactly. They are affirmations you're making to yourself. I am someone who builds wealth. And as you keep aligning your actions with this identity day after day,
The positive choices start to feel more natural.
they become less effortful, more like second nature over time. And hey, if you're finding these ideas useful and you want more practical strategies, more ways to build these habits and mindset shifts, definitely check out and subscribe to our Finance Tips YouTube channel.
Yeah, lots more great content over there.
For sure. Loads of resources to help you on your journey.
So the big takeaway here seems to be that lasting wealth, it's usually not from one big bang.
Rarely. It's the sum total, the cumulative effect of countless small, consistent wins.
And those wins gradually solidify that strong, wealthy identity.
Which then paves the way for bigger, more sustainable financial progress down the line. It builds on itself.
It really makes sense when you put it like that.
Yeah, because at its heart, money management is mostly about behavior, right?
Yeah.
And our behaviors stem directly from our identity, how we see ourselves with money.
So if you believe you're bad with money,
Your actions, unfortunately, tend to prove you right. It becomes a loop. But by consciously spotting and celebrating even the smallest financial successes,
you start to break that loop.
exactly, you initiate that powerful shift. You start fostering a new wealth-building identity. And when that core self-perception changes, it can honestly influence every single financial decision you make going forward.
That's a really hopeful message. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought.
Just consider one tiny financial win you could aim for today. Something small, totally achievable.
Something that would just give you that little spark of accomplishment, make your future self nod and say, nice one.
Thank you for exploring the power of these small wins with us today here on the Money Mindset and Habits podcast.
And one last reminder, for more practical finance tips and strategies, do hit subscribe on the Finance Tips YouTube channel.
And the final provocative thought for you to ponder, what's the absolute smallest financial action you could take, like right now, this very moment, that would send a clear signal just to yourself, hey, I am someone who is intentionally building wealth.
Thank you for listening to the Money Mindset and Habits podcast.